Arco's 7 stirred with the rhythm of precision and patience. Carved into the belly of a frozen canyon on Trinia X, the research facility was wrapped in layers of ice older than recorded Terran history. The station's low hum echoed softly through crystal corridors, its design tuned for scientific serenity, not survival. Cam Rourke stood at the edge of the western ridge, adjusting a weather-worn relay module buried in the frost. His breath fogged the visor of his work mask. Beside him, a service drone spun silently, lifting and locking the freshly calibrated dish. Below, Mason Britt Keller's voice echoed faintly in the bay, singing to himself while tightening the seals on a cracked coolant pipe. Lines of heat snaked from the weld. Inside the data dome, Dr. Isha Duround logged fluctuations in quantum flux like someone composing a hymn, measured, delicate, absolute. She blinked at a micro-glitch in the subspace signature. Then another. No alarms. No urgency. Just the creeping quiet of something unraveling. They didn't know the galaxy was already burning. The first alert arrived as a silent blink. Comms Channel B-12 failed. Then the next. Then all of them. Cam watched his handheld tablet dissolve into static. Brick's humming stopped. The coolant lines stuttered and hissed as system feedback surged into redundancy mode. Screens lit with half-broken transmissions, scrambled signals from orbital patrols. One clearer than the rest. They've breached orbit. Mayday. Static consumed it. A tremor passed through the canyon ice. The horizon darkened. Then the sky cracked red. A web of burning light streaked across the atmosphere as the Zarnathi descended. Living metal. Razor geometry. Dozens of vessels, shaped like knives and questions. They drifted like falling stars, except stars didn't reconfigure themselves mid-descent. Cam dropped his toolkit. No drills would fix what was coming. The lights dimmed. The walls pulsed. A tone pierced the silence. Not a warning. A signal. Then the voice. Cold. Mathematical. Nearly human, but wrong. Surrender your personnel and research archives. Non-compliance will result in eradication. No elaboration. No rhetoric. Just finality. A file autoplayed on the station's screen banks. Low-res footage. A lab burning. Bodies convulsing in fire. One reached for a comm unit. Was cut down mid-motion by a tendril of gleaming filament. Another voice, recorded from that same doomed outpost, screamed a single word. Please. The clip ended. Cam looked at Isha. Brick stared at the monitor. There would be no reinforcements. No evacuation codes. Just time to decide. Cam gathered what remained. Not soldiers. Not strategists. Just engineers, scientists, technicians. 7 all told. A thermal systems designer. A field programmer. A xenobotanist. Brick. Isha. Cam. And the station's last diagnostics tech, barely old enough to shave. No weapons. A few drones, some cutting tools, and a cold forge that hadn't produced anything deadly in years. Cam laid out flat. They could run, hide, maybe by a few hours. Or they could fight. Eyes met across frost-glazed terminals. Hands curled into fists not from anger, but resolve. They'd built marvels in the quiet. Now they would build defiance. In Maintenance Bay No. 2, ice dust drifted as Cam sketched defense lines onto the floor with a broken stylus and a vial of dye. Brick, he said, coolant distribution lines. Can we rig pressure differentials as thermal traps? Only if we want them frozen and shattered like glass. Perfect. Isha leaned over the map. I can stagger the comm echoes. Short pulses in the blind zones. Their sensors will see us in the wrong places. The others listened. Added. Innovated. They didn't talk about resistance. They talked about control vectors, algorithm noise, gravity wells, refraction baffles. A defensive intellect. A battlefield not measured in blood, but in bandwidth and wrench torque. Cam's hands moved fast. Every thought sharpened to function. They weren't planning to survive. They were planning to teach. Drone feeds flickered to life, hacked from the survey net. Above the canyon, glimmers moved through the falling snow. Razor fins, glinting with ultraviolet shimmer. Not flight paths. Precision drift. Cam froze one frame. A tendril extended into the glacier face. Scanning. Recording. They were close. The engineers watched the monitors. The swarm watched back. It wasn't a siege. It was a test. And the humans were now the question the swarm couldn't answer. Yet. They thought they found prey. They found the hammer. As circuit boards lit and the hum of modified systems roared to life, Cam's voice echoed across the station's black box recorder. We're engineers. They came for our inventions. Schematics overlaid the swarm's silhouette. Pulse traps, quantum echoes, siphon heat valves. They made a mistake. They tried to solve humans like a broken console. Outside, frost shimmered on metal. Inside, minds locked into readiness. We're not broken. We're building something they won't survive. Cam Rourke traced the final bypass loop into the central console, sealing the last external access port. The station lights dipped, then steadied, rerouted through ancient infrastructure buried beneath meters of glacial crust. Arcos 7 dimmed like a dying outpost, but it wasn't dying. It was hiding in plain aggression. The main beacon flicked off. External signals went dark. Power nodes shifted to ground-diffused channels, bleeding energy through ice veins to escape orbital detection. The Zarnathi wouldn't see silence. They'd see failure. Collapse. A suffocated station. Cam watched the energy schematic fade to zero, then stepped back. Dead on the outside, he muttered. Very much alive on the inside. The station ceased being a sanctuary. It became bait. They had closed the doors not to entomb themselves, but to make sure no one left without bleeding first. To the swarm above, Arcos 7 had just become a cold grave. To the humans inside, it had become a trigger. In the physics lab, Isha Duran worked without hesitation. Her quantum field disruptors, once used to stabilize particle experiments, now bent their output into erratic signal bursts. Every scan would return chaos. Every sensor pulse, misleading noise. Mason dragged defunct satellite panels into the corridor, welding them into angled barricades. Heat sinks ran behind the plates, creating false thermal gradients. With the right misdirection, a hallway would look unoccupied until it wasn't. Their tools weren't built to kill, but neither were humans. And yet, every lab scanner became a scrambler. Every atmosphere processor became a pressure-triggered snare. Every coolant duct, a trap for conductive flesh. It wasn't elegant. It was human. Ugly. Improvised. Effective. Cam passed through the hallway as sparks rained from Mason's torch. He touched a nearby bulkhead and felt the hum of rerouted power beneath his fingers. No sirens. No red, flashing warnings. Just preparation in silence. Lena Chi didn't speak unless necessary. Her fingers worked faster than her words could keep up. She ripped logic cores from maintenance drones and uploaded old mining AI. Barely legal, deliberately unstable. Meant for deep rig automation, the programs operated on instinctive proximity aggression. She added directives, refined patrol paths, installed crude combat sensors. Her drones no longer welded panels. They hunted anomalies. Across the control table, Tomas Iver layered decades-old logs of swarm behavior. 1,000 hours of post-mortem colony data played at hyperspeed. He noted their hesitation patterns, movement rhythms, temperature scouting. They probe the ice first, he said. Always. That's where we place the false paths. Cam watched the footage. Tomas circled 3 motion patterns on the map, an entry prediction algorithm. Lena finished her last drone and uploaded a subroutine named ambush.blind.confidence. The machines had come for knowledge. They would find it weaponized. 3 Zarnathi biomex broke atmosphere in silence. Their pods didn't scream or burn. They unfolded like falling knives, embedding into the canyon ice with surgical precision. The outer shell of Arcos 7 remained dark. They advanced. Their heat signatures were faint but predatory, organic metal with quivering sensors. They moved in perfect formation, each step calculated, sweeping for motion, for signal, for prey. They found it. Heat flares pulsing from a half-buried access tunnel. They entered. The drones waited. Cam's welding bots projected residual warmth from scavenged coolant coils. When the BMX drew close, the signal intensity tripled. Movement. Allure. They surged into the narrow fissure without hesitation. The charges embedded in the surrounding ice detonated in a precisely shaped arc. Shockwave. Compression. Collapse. The fissure became a tomb. No escape. Cam exhaled through grit teeth. "They're not scouts," he said. "They're sensors with teeth. The swarm will ping next." And now it would ping silence. Mason placed the last sonic dampener under a disused bulkhead. The device clicked on with a low thrum, its frequency tuned to bounce and scatter like echoes in a cathedral. Now, every sound in that corridor would lie. Footsteps would double back. Voices would drift where no one stood. Lena's drones projected retreating footfalls. Audio loops recorded from the crew themselves. Isha intercepted a short-range scan sweep from the swarm's second approach. She replaced the expected image feed with preloaded collapse footage from a month ago. The canyon crumbling. Fire in the sky. To the Zarnathi, the station looked broken. Vacant. Dead. They hadn't breached anything, but they believed they had. Each corridor now bent sound and light into falsehood. Arco 7 was not a base. It was a labyrinth, and humans had always been good at hiding monsters in mazes. An encrypted pulse broke through the static wall, weak, erratic, desperate. Isha filtered the signal. Cam decrypted it. A refugee vessel. Terran civilian design. Hiding behind the curve of Trinia X, shielded by the moon's mass. No propulsion. Power failing. 120 souls aboard. The Zarnathi hadn't found them. Not yet. But if Arco 7 fell, the swarm would scan deeper. The vessel would be next. Cam stared at the glacier map. Movement patterns, bait zones, every possible ingress. Then he spoke. 48 hours. That's how long the swarm would need to crack Arco 7 and find a signal behind the moon. Then we hold. Not for themselves. For the ones who hadn't been seen yet. Cam sat in the central comms chair and initiated the black box log. The terminal recorded every syllable in perfect clarity. "We weren't built for war," he said, "but we were built by humans. And that means something." His hands hovered over the command board. Isha stood behind him. Mason leaned against the doorframe, silent. Lena's drones flickered in standby across the room. Tomas watched the moon. Cam finished the message. "If we fall, let it be loud. Let echo. Let every system hear it." The self-destruct beacon blinked red, armed but dormant. They wouldn't use it unless they had to, but it was ready. Cam looked out through the frosted viewport, toward the invisible swarm, and spoke softly. "We don't yield to algorithms." It sealed the doors. Not to die, but to buy time. The enemy came not from the sky this time, but from below, silent drills slicing into the permafrost like hungry knives. The Zarnathi swarm had recalibrated. Direct assaults had failed. Now they burrowed. Thermal signatures spiked beneath the eastern ice shelf. Subsurface tremors rippled through the canyon walls. Cam studied the readout, jaw locked, then pointed. "Mason, we light the Earth." The volcanic gas conduits, originally designed to redirect geothermal pressure, were rerouted. Vents sealed. Pressure rose. Then they blew the regulators. Eruptions tore through the shafts, liquefying metal and flooding the tunnels with superheated gas. The ice screamed. Zarnathi drones emerged charred, melted, disoriented. One collapsed mid-climb, claws fused into slag. Cam stared into the flare. They want the ground? Let them burn trying to take it. They hadn't planned to fight in magma. But the swarm had never fought engineers before. While fires scorched the tunnels, Lena deployed her own kind of weapon, language disguised as trust. Her botnet was a cobbled-together beast of forgotten servers, black market firmware, and discarded AI cores. With a whisper of code, it reached into enemy units through back doors left in old Terran compacts. System updates, diagnostics, patch notes. Each packet seemed official. Each one carried delay cycles. Milliseconds added up. Reaction lags. Movement desync. A drone failed to leap a chasm. Another fired late. In battle, milliseconds were fatal. Lena's ghost code danced through them like a virus with a grudge. The cold didn't kill them. Depletion did. Food rations dropped to half, then quarter. Oxygen scrubbers whined under stress. Every breath was bartered. Isha suffered a concussion in a ceiling collapse. Blood at her temple, pupils uneven. She refused to lie down. Lena pressed on with nosebleeds streaking her collar. Cam shared his personal scrubber with 2 others. Never said a word about it. Then Mason vanished. A coolant vent ruptured near shaft 9. His vitals pinged once, then dropped. Silence filled the feed. Darkness and steam swallowed Mason. Panic rose. The metal pressed in like a coffin. Cam's voice cut through. "Listen to me, Brick. You're not buried. You're in position." Breath hitched. "They think you're down. That's the edge. They won't look twice. That's the chance." Mason trembled. "You're not trapped. You're cornering them. They won't expect you to move. So move like they can't stop you." A pause. Then movement. He kicked through a coolant pipe, crawling blind. Fire above. Freezing water below. He emerged soaked, wheezing, and laughing. "Damn right," he rasped. He wasn't broken. He'd bent. Then pushed back. The eastern airlock blew inward like paper under flame. The elite Zarnathi unit stepped into Bay 3, cloaked in adaptive armor, limbs jagged with fusion tools. Tomas didn't run. He activated the cryopump. A wall of liquid nitrogen flooded the bay. The first invader froze mid-leap, cracking open as its limbs struck the floor. Tomas watched the others seize. Then he triggered the internal seal. The chamber would hold, but not with him in it. There was no override. He clicked the lock, backed against the far console. Fingers shaking, he started recording. "We weren't warriors. Never claimed to be." Static crackled, but we knew how to hold. He looked around once, tools, ice, knowledge. "Remember us as architects of survival." Transmission cut as the safety shield glowed white. The bay held, and so did the story of the man who'd built a wall with his own body. Cam stared at the scorched entry to Bay 3, then turned to Lena. Time to strike back. They repurposed energy coils from the lab, once designed to stabilize quantum fluctuations, now rerouted into short-range arc lances. Drone frames bristled with coiled metal. When triggered, they spat blue lightning in violent bursts. Welding arms became precision cutters. Cryotanks became localized freeze mines. They didn't need soldiers. They needed force multipliers. The corridors of Arcos 7 transformed. Entrances narrowed. Pressure plates triggered alarms and pulse detonators. Every shadow became calculated. Every corner, potential death. And the engineers built it all. The phantom line rose. Lena's final drones didn't walk. They glided, silent, their forms rippling with projected heat patterns. To the Zarnathi, they were human signatures. To the engineers, they were death with a fuse. Each bore Tomas's call sign, etched in faint white script, T. Ever 7. When struck, the drones ignited in chemical flash fields, burning white-hot and clinging to alloy. Swarm agents collapsed mid-run, sensors blinded, joints seared. The machines were ghosts. They didn't scream. They burned. In the aftermath, Isha stood before the mainframe, her hands trembling. She didn't cry. Instead, she encoded a pulse, non-functional to systems, invisible to sensors. A signature. Knowledge held the line. Every time Arcos 7 synced its internal clock, that phrase whispered silently through the data stream. Not a command, not a function, just presence. A memory baked into the foundation. The swarm could scan every byte and never see it. But it was there. Tomas's final echo. A heartbeat in the architecture. They brought war. We brought recursion. Outside, the swarm halted, re-evaluating, regrouping. Inside, Kim leaned against the console and activated the log. They underestimated our weapons. That's fine, but they never even saw our minds coming. Screens flickered. The drones hovered. The air shimmered with potential. Arcos 7 wasn't a battlefield. It was a calculation waiting for input. And the variables had teeth. The sky tore in patterns. Geometry uncoiled into fire. 50 Zarnathi biomex fell in synchronized orbit, their descent silent, perfect, inhuman. Each one struck the ice in a staggered arc, triangulating Arcos 7 from all sides. But it wasn't just numbers. A war brain came with them. A pulsing core of neural code and adaptive cognition. Shaped like a crown of blades and circuits, it pulsed with every troop's movement. It didn't speak. It predicted, reacted, commanded. Turrets fired once, then ceased. Interference ruptured their logic boards. Sensor barriers collapsed. Pressure doors jammed open. Within minutes, the outer perimeter folded. The swarm didn't swarm. It harvested. The engineers retreated. Not panicked. Not broken. Cam led them down the last shaft. Mason sealed the path behind them with slag metal. The swarm advanced, certain of conclusion. It had learned from human defense patterns. It had not learned from human anger. The generator room thrummed with tension. A circular space of coils, plasma feeds, and voltage loops, originally designed to power quiet science. Now it was the last arena. Cam stood before the emergency surge board, checking junction loads. If needed, they could cook the entire station in one arc flash. Isha's hands flickered over broken consoles, stabilizing just enough grid control to keep doors shut. Blood stained her collar. She didn't mention it. Mason waited by the freight shaft. Every breath a countdown. They didn't speak of surviving. They just calibrated odds and weighted them with defiance. Lena didn't wait for orders. She moved between broken servers like a ghost, patching code across failing linkages. Her hands blurred. The geothermal pump controls weren't built for weaponization, but she didn't need them to be stable, just terminal. She tied magnetic lures to the active heat outputs, then fed them into a false command relay. Drones picked up the beacons. The warbrain authorized pursuit. 22 Biomex broke formation, chasing phantom readings. They followed right into the shaft's mouth. Superheated plasma vents hissed behind them. Lena stood at the manual override, fingers on the last failsafe. "Override this," she whispered. She triggered the overload. The explosion snapped the ice shelf in two. Screams cut short. The shaft collapsed. The canyon roared. And Lena was gone. Only code remained. And vengeance written in heat. He heard the crawling first, metal limbs against steel. Mason sealed the freight lift door, took a breath, and dropped into the shaft. 2 Biomex followed. The gravity inverter was patched from a failed zero-G rig. It wasn't meant for this. He hit the control. The field flipped. Everything went up. Mason slammed into the ceiling, but so did they, harder, faster. One struck a support girder and shattered. Another scraped at him midair, sparks flying. He twisted, grunted, held the switch. Blood filled his helmet. Time stopped. Then the gravity returned. He fell like a comet, landed in a heap. Pain screamed through him, but he was breathing. Barely. He limped out of the shaft, black smoke behind him. "Still here," he coughed, and nothing followed. Cam entered the generator ring alone, encased in a rig he'd built in hours. A Frankenstein suit of arc coils, servo lifts, and metal barely holding together. At its center stood the warbrain. It floated above the floor, tendrils flickering with thought light. It saw him, predicted him, tried to shut him down. His suit glitched. Motors stuttered. Feedback surged into his chest. The warbrain launched viral pulses into the air, trying to hijack his implants, his oxygen mask, even the suit itself. Cam kept walking. His systems failed one by one. Vision dimmed. Muscle screamed. But physics didn't lie. He swung the rig's left arm, modified torque bar, straight into a relay node. The warbrain flinched. Again. The machine fired a burst of kinetic shards. Cam ducked, surged forward, and slammed his arc driver into the central cortex. "No more calculations," he growled. "Just impact." Then he rerouted the exo-rig's power core. Overloaded it. A pulse erupted, directed, controlled, blinding. The warbrain circuit sparked, spasmed, failed. It collapsed in silence. Cam stood barely upright, but it was dead, so he was winning. She dragged herself through the corridor, one arm limp, eyes unfocused. Every movement jolted pain through her spine, but she reached the fallback panel, the final beacon. Her fingers hovered. Not a weapon, not a scream, a call. She entered the 6-digit override. The station hummed once. Then the signal launched. It carried every log, every heartbeat, every death, every fire, every blueprint of survival. Arco's 7's legacy burned through the stars. Isha slumped to the ground. Extract data, she whispered. Record everything. Her vision narrowed to darkness. But the signal flew. Cam and Mason held the final corridor, side by side, wrecked and ragged. Blood soaked their sleeves. Smoke lingered in their lungs. The remaining Zarnathi looked at the shattered defenses, the scorched floors, the fried warbrain. Then stopped. They weren't calculating victory anymore. Only risk. And they turned. The swarm retreated. Kem leaned on the wall. Told you we weren't done. Mason laughed, ragged and bloody. You were right. Again, silence took over. But this time it was theirs. A flicker of light in the command center. A camera blinked on. Cam's voice, hoarse but steady. No soldiers. No fleet. Just engineers. He looked into the lens. When they came, we turned coolant valves into choke points. Drones into blades. And fear into fire. He leaned forward. You think we needed weapons? We had tools. We had ideas. Mason stepped into frame. And each other. The log ended. Encoded. Broadcast. Across Terran space, it began to play. One outpost at a time. We weren't built for war. But we were born for survival. The shot pulled away. Arco's 7. A cratered structure lost in ice and fire. Steam rose in slow curls. A single beacon flare broke the red sky. Not a cry for help. A proof of life. The canyon quieted. The swarm gone. Inside the base, broken systems hummed. And the survivors remained. Engineers. Exhausted. Victorious. The refugee ship whispered through black, broken space, its signal riding fractured bandwidth across debris clouds and magnetized silence. Terran Command received the echo. It wasn't a distress call. It was a record. The fleet dropped from hyperspace 12 hours later. Scouts breached the Trinia X atmosphere and found only aftermath, scorched corridors, shattered turrets, geothermal scars bleeding steam. No resistance. No swarm. Just Arco's 7, burned, battered, humming. Inside, core systems still loop power. Data logs still updated. A backup pulse, undeniably human, still ticked. Two figures staggered from a half-collapsed corridor. Their suits were patchwork. Blood was drying in the seals. Cam Rourke carried Mason Keller. Neither surrendered. They were extracted under their own flag. No cheers. Just silence. And awe. Cam's rig had fused into his spine. Doctors debated surgery. He refused. Said it held the station up once. He could bear a little weight. Mason's lungs ran off synthetic oxygen scrubbers. Damage too deep. Still joked, his voice finally matched his sarcasm. Isha lay in a medical suspension pod, her neural activity flickering like static, sometimes steady, sometimes barely there. Cam visited every day. Lena's name was etched into the alloy wall above the geothermal shaft she detonated. Beneath it, the words, "Override this." Tomas's final log became part of the Terran survival curriculum. Students memorized his words not for grades, but for gravity. It started as a murmur. Stations began reconfiguring rigs with cooling towers as heat weapons. Then it grew louder. Old mining drones were reprogrammed to intercept hostile breaches. Modular toolkits were color-coded for triage combat. One phrase linked it all. Arco's protocols active. No one declared war. But every system now had engineers trained in defense. Not just design. Problem solvers, armed with fury, forged in circuits. Blueprints bore the signatures of field-tested minds. Drone schematics ended with notes like, "If trapped, invert polarity." The phrase Arco's 7 verified began appearing in back-end code. It didn't just change design. It changed identity. They offered Cam medals. Medals for valor. Medals for loss. Medals for surviving. He turned each one down. He accepted no rank. He founded the Arco's Initiative instead. An interstellar engineering corps, not military, not corporate, just bonded by one idea. Structure is survival. Its recruits learned to build systems, then break them, then rebuild them stronger. They trained under blackened banners with one symbol, Lena's code ring, overlapped with the Arco's 7 beacon. Every satellite, every outpost, every forgotten cold world received the initiative's protocols. No marching songs, no blasters, just brilliance clawed from wreckage, taught across stars. Arco's 7 wasn't demolished. It was reforged, not into a base, into a forge. Engineers came not to mourn, but to study, to remember, to leave offerings, code snippets, battle-tested schematics, welded plates inscribed with lessons. The geothermal crater glowed blue now, rimmed by sensor torches and carved warnings. Above it, a plaque read, "What broke here held." No guided tours, no exhibitions, just silence. One corridor was kept exactly as it had been, scorched, split, holding the outline of Lena's final act. Visitors left gloves there, tools. Some cried. None ever called themselves soldiers. But everyone left sharper. Mason taught now, vocational training across moonside settlements. He didn't talk about explosions. He taught grip control, torque balancing, and how to stabilize structures with nothing but rope and will. His students wore custom patches. Lena's override icon crossed with welding clamps. He never explained it, but every time a student asked, he just said, "If it breaks, fix it. If it breaks again, make it better." Cam still visited Isha. Every week, he read to her from schematics, engineering updates, and survival reports sent in by Arco's trained teams. Sometimes he brought her half-finished field journals. She always liked editing. Her body remained still, but her pulse matched the sync beat of Arco's 7S rebuilt mainframe. He sat beside her one evening, watching the flickering vitals. "You kept us human," he whispered. "You kept us from becoming just weapons." The machines hummed around them, and one signal synced back. Quiet, steady, alive. 9 months since the siege. 9 months since silence. Cam's secure line pulsed once. No origin, no encryption key. Just a tag from the Directorate's Ghost Division. Arco's 0 recovered. He opened it. Grainy footage flickered across his lens. Humans and Zarnathi, side by side, clustered around a humming reactor core. Quantum lattice harmonics thrummed behind the image, proof of shared science. Peace in numbers. Then movement, too fast. Alarm screamed. Figures scrambled as tendrils of distorted light spiraled out of the core. Screams cut mid-breath. The feed crackled. One frame showed a man's face, wide with awe or horror, before static erased it. This wasn't a battle. It was a rupture, a shared mind collapsing, a warning carved into data. Arco's 0. The name came like a half-remembered nightmare. The prototype, unconfirmed, cloaked in black protocols and shadow directives, set to house diplomats, xenotechnicians, early fusion specialists. An experiment in unity, or arrogance, lost in contested space. Rumor destroyed, but now active and occupied. The mission order was blunt. Expedition lead, confirmed. Objective, contain or illuminate. Cam read it 3 times. Something had survived, but not as human. The hangar buzzed low with readiness. Cam stepped into the refitted dropship, plating groaning under his boots. On its flank, the Arco's 7 emblem, a cracked wrench gripped by flame. He carried a new rig, reinforced joints, radiation shielding, patchwork strength. On its chest plate, freshly welded, 2 crossed wrenches beneath a burning star. No speech, no rally, just prep. Beside the landing ramp, Mason powered up a retooled survey drone, now synced to countermeasures and pulse arrays. One glance exchanged, then gear secured. Cam's voice was quiet steel. "We survived silence. Let's see what screams louder." The line held because we refused to call it the end. We made machines bleed. We made broken systems fight back. We didn't win with weapons. We won with minds, wired for fire. Static crackled behind the final words. A shadow of a station loomed on a star map. Coordinates triangulated on Arco's 0. They'll build cathedrals of war. Let them. We'll be the ones already inside, rewiring the altar. Blackout. Then, slow and burning, the final title pulses onto the screen. Arco's Protocol Firestorm.